Welcome back to JZFishing, you guys, and in today's video I'm going to be going over some tips and tricks to help you catch more saltwater fish on your next trip.
Alright, one tip is to not gob your bait onto the hook for multiple reasons. The first of all is so that your hookup ratio is so much better. That way when the fish bites, there's an exposed hook for it to get hooked on. Second reason is it just looks more natural. If you've got those squid tentacles trailing out and they're all flapping in the current, they're gonna be more enticing than just a bait that's gobbed onto the hook and just looks like a ball of edible stuff.
Now this next tip is something that I would suggest you use for any type of fishing, but really it's important when you're going saltwater fishing, and that is always check your line before casting out. Now, a lot of times, and it's happened to me, it's happened to Jack, it's happened to Zach, we'll cast out our lines without even looking at them, and we hook up to a big stingray or even a big shark, and that line snaps when it hits a rock. Now, especially when you're using braid, if you hit a couple of rocks after a couple of fish, that braid will get very abraded, and you can see that. And if that does happen, just cut that piece off and tie on a new, tie on the rig again. I'm telling you, it'll help improve your fishing experience, and you'll lose a lot less fish.
Another tip is to not overestimate the weight size that you need. You only need the lightest amount of weight to get it out there and on the bottom consistently. If you've got anything heavier than that, it's just unnecessary, and you may lose that fish of a lifetime.
The next tip on today's list is about this bad boy right here. Now, when you're using live bait, you're obviously going to need a container to store the live bait, and you're going to need the water. But the most important part, in my opinion, is this thing right here. This is called a bubble box or a bubbler, depending on what you call it. And pretty much what it does is you can open it up, there's a little bit of a kind of dispenser thing. It's like a cord that has a little ball on it. You just put it in the water, you turn this thing on, and pretty much what it does is it gives fresh oxygen to your bait. Long story short, it keeps your bait alive longer, keeps them fresher, and so when they get put in the water, they're going to still be very lively and attractive fish.
Right, this next tip seems small, but is actually very big. Always remember gloves or some sort of thing to wash your hands, because if you're like me, I cannot stand not only the smell of the squid on my hands, but the feel of the squid and then the salt water that you pretend to use to wash off the squid. It just sucks. Bring gloves.
The next tip on today's list also has to do with another kind of product. This is what we like to call a sabiki rig. Now, we will be doing a dedicated sabiki rig video hopefully sometime soon, because these little guys are so helpful, and there's not a whole lot of videos on the internet about using a sabiki rig around here. There's only like one or two. So pretty much, if you don't already know, a sabiki rig is a 6-hook rig. These tiny little hooks. You attach a weight to one end, and then you attach this swivel to your main line on your rod. You drop this thing down, usually put some bait on these hooks, and you use these hooks to try and catch bait. So in our case, here in the Marin Bay Area, we like to catch anchovies, maybe some herring. Smelt is another popular species. Sometimes surf perch will eat these things. And so it's a great way to catch a live bait instead of having to go to a bait shop and buy it yourself. If you want to see us make a video on how we like to use these, tell us in the comment section below, and hit the subscribe button. Turn on post notifications, that way you'll never miss any of our future videos.
Alright, in terms of hook size, you're going to want something that's small enough to fit inside the fish's hook. When in doubt, go smaller. But now you don't want to go too small, the fish is going to pull it. So when you buy hooks, just look at them, and if you can, test them to see if they bend. If they don't bend, then you're probably fine. But if they do bend, watch out.
When it comes to saltwater fishing, sometimes a lot of the fish species that you guys are going to be catching, whether you're in the bay or not, are going to have some teeth. So that's why I like these. Pliers. They seem simple, but you always have to have pliers in your backpack, because no matter if the hook is even in the corner of the mouth, you do not want to get close to those teeth, because you don't want to lose a finger or a hand. Always bring pliers or wire cutters, depending on what kind of species you're going after. It'll save you, literally sometimes, a hand or a finger.
A huge myth that even I fall into is the farthest cast catches the biggest fish. Now that's sometimes true, but not necessarily always. So when you're going out fishing, instead of just trying to cast it the farthest, do like casting distance thing, try and look to where the fish are biting. Look if there are any blow-ups, look if there's any structure, and that's what you want to cast. You want to cast towards the fishy spots, not the farthest spots.
Alright, once you've casted out your line and you're setting your rod back up in place, whether that's in a rod holder or in your hand, one thing that I always like to do, and I did do when I started, but I wish I did, would be obviously close your bail and loosen your drag. Now, this is helpful, especially when you're on a pier, because if you have your drag tight, and especially like something big, like a stingray comes and takes your bait, your rod is probably going to go in the water. Another thing too is, if you have your drag loose, if a fish bites, even the slightest bit, you'll hear that drag go off, right? Whereas with your tight drag, you probably won't hear the drag. So one thing that I always like to do, as soon as I cast out, put it back in the rod holder and loosen that drag. It'll help you guys out.
Now, kind of adding on to Joe's tip. So, right, you've got your rod set up and you hear this, which is a fishing biting, right? So you go to pick it up, and if you just set the hook now, you're just going to get a nasty bird's nest and the fish is going to come off. There's going to be too much slack. But if you grab the reel, set the hook, and then as you're setting the hook, start tightening the drag, then you're going to hook up to the fish, and then you'll be able to fight the fish normally.
Alright you guys, my last tip of the day is fishing bells. Now we all actually made a fishing bell video, link will be I think here, go check that thing out. But fishing bells are really important. You put it on the tip of your rod, and then pretty much what happens is if a fish bites it even the slightest bit, the bell goes off, you look at the rod, you see it bending. It's really nice, especially when you're fishing multiple rods. That way you won't have to be looking at every single rod. I specifically use bells a lot when I have one rod on one side of the pier and one rod on the other side, because it is physically impossible to be looking at both rods at the same time. So bells are a lifesaver, and they're really cheap, so go get some.
My last tip of the day is about fighting the fish. You want to keep your eye on the line in the water. That way you can tell pretty well about where the fish is going, because your line should be taut. So where your line is, it's just a continuous line towards the fish. So if your line's over here and there's a pier over here, you've got to be worried about the fish going over there. So maybe at that point you tighten the drag and you try and muscle it in. But if your fish is out in open water, there's no need to tighten the drag. Let it do its thing, you do your thing, stay calm.
If you're here, thank you for watching all the way to the end. We really, really appreciate the support. If you want to see more saltwater fishing videos and freshwater videos, click here. We got a playlist with all of our fishing videos. Go check those out. Also, don't forget to subscribe this week and maybe even next week. We're doing daily uploads, so you don't want to miss it. Click the little bell, that way I'll never miss any of our uploads.